All right, listeners, welcome to the Talent Forge. Today, I am joined by an amazing talent development professional, somebody I've known for quite a few years from the Association for Talent Development. She is an author, she is a trainer, she is a designer, she's a speaker. She does all of the above, and she does it incredibly well. Welcome to the show, Dr. Esther Jackson. Thank you for being here with us today.
Jay, it is a pleasure and an honor. Thanks for having me. And not sure who you were describing with that intro, but
Well,
appreciate it.
we're going to dig into it because I have always just been incredibly inspired by the things that you do in the talent development space. Why don't we start with a simple one? How did you get into this space, Dr. Esther? Because that's actually something I don't even know. How did you find yourself on this pathway?
Very interesting question. And as I reflect back, Jay, so I do have some experiences in the public sector, private sector, as well as working with nonprofits, thanks to ATD. And funny enough, I went to school to be an elementary school teacher. K through 8. That was, my dream, my art. Started in college with the focus on accounting because I love math. Then after one accounting course, that's not the kind of math I want to do. And I jumped over after some advising to engineering. Oh, the engineers are paid and in full, and it's prestigious and all of that, what we've heard, only to find that there's a bit too much science with that math, and that's not my forte. And I had to ask myself the question that so many of us are asked or have to ask ourselves: what is it I gravitate to? What is it, if I wasn't being paid, that my heart is there and I do it without that financial benefit? And it was teaching.
I love
So
that.
I did that, and in the process ended up getting a job working for the city of Detroit. And from there, once I graduated, going through the College of Education and everything, I ended up with a job at the city working in the training division,
Mm.
which at the time was the Organization for Employee Development Services. And we essentially handled training for the city staff. And lo and behold, upon graduating, I was asked, "Hey, Esther, instead of going into teaching, you're already here in training. Why don't you take a training job?" And that launched a different future. I asked myself again other questions because, wonderful conversations happen when you have those conversations with yourself, Jay.
Yep.
So it was a matter of principal's office, homework, or folks coming to your class and they go back to work when class is over. Think I got my decision made there.
Yeah, right.
And then it helped too, Jay, that teaching children, that's also a passion of mine. And that was something I was able to do in being the head of a children's ministry at my church at the time. So
That's
I was
awesome.
still able to get the benefit of both. And so that's essentially how I started in workplace learning or corporate training. And that opened up a whole new world. Because when I initially went to undergrad, Jay, I had no idea about corporate training, like I'm sure is the case for many teachers.
I heard two things. I study behavioral science. I heard two things. You have a lot of heart and a lot of resilience for the people that you're doing. But I mean, it's so amazing to hear. Yeah, my career started a little differently with somebody patting me on the shoulder saying, "Hey, you're pretty good at this. You should do it." I was like, "Maybe I will. This sounds awesome." What does that mean? So, oh, it's so funny. But as you mentioned, I do think it's kind of interesting. Accounting was probably my weak point when I started my business, and learned from an accountant how weak of a point it was, and have never made that mistake again. So go to the right professionals. They're going to take care of you. So, all right. So you started down this road, Dr. Esther, and I love that. How was it? What was your experience in working with municipal government? We got a lot of trainers that are going to be listening, that are some are going to be in industry, some are going to be freelance, some are going to be consultants. How was that experience in working for a municipality? Was there unique challenges? Was there, opportunities that maybe we wouldn't see in regular? What was that like?
Certainly. So, one unique challenge, and probably not so unique, but was certainly with the budget.
Hmm.
and some of the red tape involved there. I have to say, I really appreciate the fact that we weren't always afforded the luxury of being able to outsource. So a lot of what we were offering, every blue moon, we'd have a vendor that we'd leverage, especially when it came to like maybe supervisory training and specialized high level management training we were looking to do. But for the most part, I was able to really get my feet wet with not only facilitating, Jay, but also doing the development, instructional design from scratch and learning about the basics. So, in addition to me making a decision after undergrad that, hey, I think I want to do this for real. Let me take that training gig. I decided to pursue my master's in instructional technology, which is workplace learning. And then in the process, the city where I was working, they also sent me to some additional training to really develop and hone in on my facilitation and instructional design skills. So appreciate that opportunity. And that exposed me to being able to, at an early age and early in my career, do diversity training development from scratch. So I not only have the ability to participate in projects and lead in some instances the training that was designed, but also facilitated as well. And so I was able to do that for diversity, sexual harassment, some technical skills, all of the Microsoft Office programs, Word,
Quite
PowerPoint,
the wide
Excel,
variety.
as well as things like project management. So in a good place at a good time, once it was time for me to actually finish up the capstone for my master's, I was able to actually design a whole 2-day project management workshop, go through all of the steps within the ADDIE phases, and use a focus group from the city to pilot it, get real-time feedback, incorporate that in my formative evaluation as well as the summative evaluation, go through all of those pieces step by step with analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation to have that final product with my very first from scratch facilitator's guide, participant manual, my full-blown slide deck for this 2-day program. So that was my proudest moment with the incorporation of gamification. So I gamified it as well, Jay, with the Jeopardy game. So very
Awesome.
proud moment for me some years back as I reflect. And
Oh my
so being
gosh, there's
able to go through those, just awesome and covering so many different topics. And it ended up a little over 30 different topics that I was able to facilitate, and I would say over 70% of them were programs that I actually designed.
That is incredible. And there's literally so much to unpack there. So I'm going to start with a low-hanging fruit. Some of the people that are listening maybe are not members of the ATD yet. You should be a member of the ATD if you're in this talent development space. It is the absolute creme de la creme of organizations for people like us. But can you just give a quick synopsis of what the ADDIE model is? You mentioned that it's a powerful tool that I use in my practice. Obviously, I know you do too. But what is the ADDIE model? If you could just give a brief one.
Absolutely. So the ADDIE model is a classic instructional design model that is often used, and it's almost as if you are in the field of talent development and you design instruction in any kind of way for adults, you absolutely need to know about ADDIE. There's no way you should not be Googling or researching somewhere to find out what ADDIE is. And it's something that was originally developed within the military in partnership with, I believe it was Florida State University, around the year I was born, but we don't need to talk about that year, Jay.
Like 25 years ago, I'm sure.
Good answer, Jay. Good answer. It is so ADDIE allowed for what they call more of a waterfall type of model where you go in more so like a linear or flow that allows you to go through steps in one phase, complete those, then move to another phase. And it just had a logical flow for how you go about the design, development, and all of that for almost any topic you want to design and develop for workplace learning when it comes to adults. And essentially, it's starting with something that I hold near and dear, the 7 habits of highly effective people. Habit number 2, begin with the end in mind. So in that analysis phase, you're talking about what is it that's the end goal? What is it we're trying to solve for? What's the problem here at hand? What's that learning gap? And all of that comes out of the analysis and looking at first answering the question, do we even have a problem here that can be addressed with a learning solution? And some organizations skip that, miss it, and jump to got a performance problem, training is needed.
Negotiations training, go. Ready? That's not even and this is part of the reason that we started this podcast, because we see stats like 90% of training is ineffective. And I think that you are spot on. A big part of the reason is because of that little a in the ADDIE is not adequately analyzed. Are we really solving a problem? Are we looking at the right problem to solve? And is the learning solution, a training or a coaching program, the right solution to get us to that behavioral change?
You're talking my language,
Uh,
Jay. You're talking my language. And one of the programs, I do several programs for ATD at the national level, certificate programs, one of which is managing learning programs. And another is instructional design. And so one of the topics that's relevant to both deals with that very question. What steps have you taken to ensure that you are developing, as you mentioned, the right solution to the right problem instead of the right solution to the wrong problem, or vice versa? And so one of the things that I sometimes reference is something called Gilbert's 6-box model. And it takes a look at 3 aspects of the employee and 3 aspects of the environment to see, hey, there are 6 boxes here, 6 particular areas. One is like the motivation, one is dealing with the materials and things that are afforded to the employee. Another is dealing with training. And then there are 3 additional areas. Only one of those speaks to training, the skills and the knowledge. All of those other 5 areas speak to things like the reinforcement, the motivation. Is there any feedback being given to the employee? Well, no wonder they're not doing it. They know the right thing to do. And Jay, you are a guru when it comes to facilitating and training. How many times have you heard, oh, this sounds well and good, but when I get back to the job, I won't be able to apply this or incorporate this back on the job? So then we have that disconnect between, hey, they've passed level 2 of Kirkpatrick's level of evaluation. They can apply what they learned in that learning setting. But for level 3, to look to see, is that learning transferring back to the job? There's a missing link there. What is it? What happened? So
Yeah. Well, and my favorite is always one of those where it's like, oh, we have a revenue problem. Let's do sales training. And it's just like, is that the actual issue? Do your salespeople not know how to sell? Do they not have tactics? And sure, you can bring in a salesperson or somebody that's got strategy or whatever, but have you considered the fact that maybe your salespeople aren't motivated to sell for your company? That they're not looking at this and saying, well, I'm making enough money by doing what I'm doing. If I did more, it'd be more work, more paperwork. Or like, have you really examined why you need that training? And it's just such it seems so obvious, but it's missed so often, it seems to me.
that's that analysis, Jay. You really hit it spot on. With that analysis, it's answering not only what the problem is, but also the why and whether or not it's actually a learning problem. And should you find that, yes, it is a lack of skill, it's a lack of knowledge, and we can address it with learning, then that speaks to, okay, so which aspect of the KSA is applicable? Is
Mhm.
it a knowledge problem? Is it a skills problem? Is it an attitude problem? Where we
Love
can
that.
look to see how training could address those. But if it's something different and there's not an issue in those areas, then there's no need to go through the rest of ADDIE with, okay, let's design whatever the learning solution is. That's that first D in ADDIE. So
Yeah.
we're talking about doing a blueprint or some type of lesson plan for the teachers out there. And we may look to those with respect to adult learning as maybe a design document, which is comparable to a lesson plan,
Right.
where we spell out things like the objective, what's for that particular exercise or segment, as well as looking at What are the activities that best meet fulfilling that objective? How long will it take? Will there be a slide shown? Will it be a lecturette? Are we doing something online with a drag and drop? Is this going to be a role play? So that's something that really excites me, and looking to beginning with my end in mind, what's going to be an interaction and engagement activity that allows for me to best approach this particular objective, and mapping that all out. What are maybe some authoring tools that may be leveraged if we're talking about something that may be virtual or completely virtual or in not hybrid, or if it's in person, what does that look like? And so a number of things that go into that design, and then the development, flushing out what was created and identify in the design, and developing the actual tools, the slide deck, the activities, whatever props, whatever handouts, facilitator guide, participant manuals that go into that. And then implementation, you're talking about doing your piloting, testing things out. Does it work? Is it on track with what we were targeting? And then finally, with the evaluation, is it doing what we wanted it to do? What do we want it to do? We identified that back in the analysis. If
Yep.
we didn't do a good job of identifying that end in mind, that learning goal, the supporting or the objectives that cascade down from that goal, then we will likely have a problem with the evaluation.
Yeah. And so just analysis, design, development, implementation, evaluation. That's the ADDIE model. If you need more information on it, you can definitely find it on the ATD website. Just do that Google search, because there is a ton of really good information out there on ADDIE and how important it is. It was interesting when I was introduced to ADDIE, I had been looking at design thinking, and that's a big part of the way that I had developed different things, prototyping something, implementing it, testing it, getting the feedback, going back, but the empathy stage and all of that. So, have something where you are evaluating the problem. But I do want to pivot here for 1 second. And part of the reason is because I think that you're incredibly unique in the talent development space. And when I say unique, one of the things that I see is a lot of times you have somebody who is very, very much motivated, enthused, and excited about facilitation. I do also see, on the other hand, people who are motivated, excited, and enthused about designing an experience or managing an experience, but not so much the facilitation side. And you don't see as often somebody who is as exceptional at design as they are at facilitation. And I think that you live that day in and day out. So I would like to, share with the audience, if you could, how important is it to you that you both take on that experience of a facilitator and a trainer and an instructor, but also as that person that's in the backside managing and or developing or designing, because it's not always the same skill set. And some people are really predisposed to one or the other, and that's okay. But how does that show up for you and your day-to-day work?
Oh, that's a great question that I've never had before, Jay. I have to tell you, going back to in the work I do, I work in a company in Michigan, rocket companies, in a role that's really dedicated to the DEI space. And then I also have my own business where I assist clients and work with clients who may have needs for instructional design development, DEI, facilitating a session, working with their leadership on something else. And then I'm also doing some other things to promote my book and doing ATD certificates. And then I try to make time here or there to teach at a couple of universities.
When do you sleep, Dr. Esther? When do you sleep?
So one thing that I have to really hone in on, that I'm always working on, especially seeing some of the things that are trending with things now in L&D that are really elevating and escalating in importance, like artificial intelligence, as well as where that impact is, and connecting learning to the bottom line for a business. In order for me to do that, I have to go back to something you mentioned and that I was talking about, with beginning with the end in mind. What's the end goal? And so from there, once I've identified what the need is, what my end goal is, whether it's something I'm doing or it's been initiated from work I'm doing for a client or for an organization or in my day-to-day job, once that has been identified with a goal in mind, then I actually revert to things like design thinking, that empathy phase,
Mhm.
Jay, and
Yep.
look at, hey, putting myself in a learner's place. What is it that's going to maybe be attractive to me? What is it that's going to engage me, provoke my attention, and maintain it? What is it that's going to speak to the adult learning principles that we get from andragogy, thanks to Malcolm Knowles, talking about the ability to connect it to what I need to know now. Also, how is this going to help make my life easier, personally or professionally, as well as maybe connecting some of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I go through that kind of processing when it comes to what I'm designing, as well as giving thought to what does this look like when it plays out based on what's happening now. I can't go back to what I did when I did my 2-day project management workshop at Wayne State some years back because there are different things trending now, Jay. So I have to stay current with what's happening now, what's going to speak to that technology piece, the advanced technology we're seeing that's being applied to maintain as attention, as well as those levels of engagement that we target, along with connecting to the bottom line for a business so they can see the impact, and I can see impact from whatever it is I'm designing as well as facilitating. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
It does. It speaks to your I'm just gonna this is my ham-handed segue into this. It speaks to your adaptability and your ability to essentially bounce from the technology space to the design space to the I can experience this. Of what if I was sitting in this audience? Would I be interested in this? Would I be enjoying this? And ironically enough, adaptability is a pretty big aspect of your world, given that your book title is Adaptability and Talent Development. So there's your segue, there's your plug. Can you tell us a little bit about your book, Adaptability and Talent Development?
Absolutely. And I really appreciate that question because one, the opportunity to write the book, Jay, was a result of adaptability. I was working in the private sector and doing some things with ATD. And I got that bug, Jay, that feeling that, hey, I need to be doing something to really put myself out there. And it just so happened would regularly go through the ATD magazine, and it's the TD magazine under ATD, and look to see. That was one of the things I would do in addition to looking at white papers, viewing online articles and things, but trying to stay current with what's trending, what's the greatest of all time, what's the latest and greatest, what are organizations doing that are really, making a name for themselves in that space. And so I happened to be reading through one particular issue and saw a name I recognized. And I said, oh my goodness, so and so has an article in here. I could have an article. What am I doing? So, Jay, we had this thing at the organization where I was working at the time where we had to do blogs and articles anyway to assist with the marketing in our organization. And so this was not the city, it was another company where I was. And it just so happened the article I submitted, I did something on adaptability. And the marketing leader didn't feel like it quite hit what we were going for. So it was rejected and I had to start from scratch. So I put that article to the side, Jay, and I felt like, well, you know what? I said I needed to submit an article to ATD anyway. I don't need to throw this away. Let me see if, even though my job doesn't want it, ATD sees value in it. So, Jay, I submitted the article. They liked it. And they said, we just need to do a few tweaks. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, they're going to rip it apart, but I don't care. It's going to be published. Jay, they made very minor changes to that article to a point that it scared me. I'm like, that's all you're changing? Do you need to go another round or something? Because
Are
this
you
is my
sure this
first
went through?
article. So from there, that was the November 9th, 2019 issue. that my article was published, and it was about today's resilience requires adaptability, and there was something else that I had in the title, but it was essentially about adaptability. And then from there, some months after, I just felt like I needed to do another article and sent them a couple of outlines. And from there, I received an email inquiring about, hey, we're looking to do a series, want to know if you do a book on adaptability and blah, blah, blah. And Jay, I thought it was a hacker. Okay. Because there was so much going on and I didn't take it seriously, but I responded very nonchalantly. And one thing led to another, had a couple of calls, and it became real when I received the book contract to write a book. And so I spoke with the editor for the third time and happened to mention, I can't believe all of this came from me asking you all about a couple of articles. And if you'd be interested. And it turned out the editor had no idea what I was talking about. He happened to come across my article from November 2019 and thought adaptability would be a good addition to
Wow.
his series. And Jay, absolutely, maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, I received a response from another department in ATD saying, hey, we like this article outline. This is the one we want you to write on. So I happened to start writing the book and had to do the article at the same time. And all of that happened in the heart of COVID.
Wow. That's there's, oh my gosh, that is so awesome.
Yeah, that's why I absolutely say it was adaptability, because one of the aspects of adaptability is being able to see opportunity in those unexpected conditions or unforeseen change. Totally different from change management, where you see the change coming or you're making a change happen and you have to keep on target with it and manage it in the process. But adaptability, it's out of your control. You didn't see it coming. And that's exactly what happened with, the things that progressed and the book opportunity coming about for me. And thank goodness I didn't throw that article away that was rejected, because that was the catalyst for me.
And I'm gonna jump on there, audience. That is one of the best tips that I think that you can walk away from this podcast with. Publish content, whether it's on your own blog. Don't throw it away. I have been writing a book for 10 years, and I've probably thrown away, I'm gonna say, 50 pages worth of content over the years because I was just like, no, I don't like this. Don't do that. Set it aside, put it aside. I'm reminded of, and it's a parable. A person takes the car to go sell the car, and the first person says, "Nah, it's not a great car. I'll give you 2,000." He takes it somewhere else, and they say, "Well, we'll sell it for parts. We'll give you 2,500." Takes it to the third person and says, "Do you realize that this is an antique? That people pay premium dollars for this type of thing?" And we never know exactly who is going to see the value in something. You may only affect 10 people, but that's 10 people that you've impacted. And one of those people might be that person going, that needs to get out to the larger audience. It's such an important thing. Publish content, get it out there, add to the knowledge base, and just do it. And don't throw it away, because that is literally, all those things that I did end up throwing away early on. I'm like, oh, why did I do that? They might have been useful. I don't know, maybe not. New stuff coming. Let's just put it that way.
It's in the past now. It's in the
That's right.
past now.
In
We're
the
not going to
past.
dwell on it. We're not going to get stuck, but we're
That's
looking
right.
forward.
No,
And
but that's
something I absolutely make sure I pass on to other folks, especially when they ask, well, Esther, what advice would you don't? One of the first things I say is what you mentioned, Jay, don't throw anything away, even if the editor, or whomever has to sign off, rejects it, turns it away, even things that I've had, in the course of writing the book when I was working on it. I still maintained it. Those were things I was able to leverage, even though they didn't go into the book. I was able to use them for a blog or for an article that kind of aligned to the book and thing. And it saved me some time and heartache, as well as allowed me to leverage a different perception or a different aspect of a point I was making. So when I think about it with the book, to really hone in on what you mentioned about having that published work, one of the things they talk about in the 7 habits, even in the book Covey mentions, is the importance of leaving a legacy. You know,
Mhm.
people aren't necessarily going to remember what your title was in the organization. You know, is that something they will really emphasize in your obituary? But something they will emphasize likely would be like my book. And so being able to say that that was a piece of literature that I left behind for the world. No, I'm not going to have this title that's left behind. It didn't really touch folks or make impact because I was in this leadership role or I was running my own company or this or that. You know, maybe that does it for you. But my legacy, I want to be able to say that I made true impact, I contributed, and my book, my dissertation, those are just a couple of examples where I was able to make that connection that has something that's left behind from me when I'm well and gone.
I have seen you for many years, and outside of those publications, you have also left an indelible mark on people that have learned from you, that have worked with you, and I have absolutely no doubt you'll continue to do so, Dr. Esther. I want to go into that adaptability. One more piece there because this is all about shaping that future of talent development. And to do so, we have to adapt and we've got to do some things differently. That's why I got into this space many years ago, is because I realized, hey, I'm noticing something that's occurring at the end of my trainings or at the end of my facilitations that's not occurring with some of the other people that I was working with. And I started to really try to study that. And one of the things that I noticed was in the middle of a facilitation, I was able to see where the things were going, take a look at the audience, see how this was reacting, and completely pivot right there in the middle of the facilitation and go, okay, this is not going in the direction I needed to. Or this is going so much better in a direction that I didn't anticipate. I need to spend more time here, and being able to be adaptable, not just, as we're designing, but also within that framework of facilitation. Can you speak to that, how that adaptability really plays for you as you're delivering knowledge or as you're delivering, like, sort of in that classroom? How do you use your adaptability skills to really elevate the experience for your participants?
How much time do we have left, Jay?
Oh, for you, I will make time.
So there's so much packed into that question. So let me try to pull back and make it brief. One thing I really find that's beneficial is thinking about several of the adaptability skills that I cover in some adaptability presentations. One of the skills that I mentioned is being willing to be agile, like you mentioned. That takes a gift. What you just explained, Jay, when you're in a course of going through your flow, you planned it out, you had that lesson plan, that design document together, and you find you've reached that point where it's not hitting the way you expected it to hit. They're not responding like you anticipated. It's not easy to be able to say, okay, let me redirect, let me pivot, let me try something different, or let me go off in that tangent. So being able to focus in on, hey, I have to think about it being proactive when I'm designing, when I'm planning my facilitation. How do I unlearn some things that cause me to be locked into I have to follow through my plan? How do I make myself more flexible? Another adaptability skill, so that I'm focusing on my end in mind. What's that experience like for my learner? That means if I'm driving for the learner's experience and not for Esther's facilitation plan, then that's my end goal. And I have to be willing to adjust, which means I have to factor in what are those skills that I learned with facilitation and being able to read my audience, whether they're in person or virtual. Am I responding to that? Just as you pointed out, does it look like they are really attentive when it comes to certain elements, certain topics? Have I allowed opportunity? I just had a video that I did today where I was doing a welcome for the group that I'm expecting to have at the ATD conference, which will be managing learning programs. We're going to New Orleans next month, and we have a pre-conference workshop on managing learning programs. And one of the things I typically encourage them to do in this welcome video is bring your burning questions, load them and upload them to the platform, and also let us know, is there a current initiative, a current project that you're working on where not only will I be able to share my experience and knowledge, but you can collaborate in that space. And so that's another thing that I find so useful, Jay, is when I'm able to be a little bit more flexible. And when I see that collaboration time, they're really thriving, and there's a vibe there when people are able to share a problem or get a question answered by not just me, but other participants, I go with it. And
Yeah.
when I see it's still aligning with my goal, I'll explain to them, hey, you all, we're deviating slightly from our agenda. Here's why. And here's how we're still going to fulfill our goal. So I'm being sure to communicate that to them
Mhm.
because we're going to meet our objectives in one way or another, whether it be I'm going to send some follow-up materials,
That's right.
or hey, here's that action plan. Need you all to make sure you do so and so, or hey, I know we are grown adults. This is workplace learning, but guess what? You have homework tonight. I need you all to make sure.
Yeah.
So, just a few things that I will do when it's necessary to pivot and when I'm finding that, hey, what I thought was going to be a hit, that game, that exercise, that activity, that video, that question was not as impactful or powerful as I anticipated. And with adaptability, Jay, we learn from our experiences for the future and how to unlearn some things and be more curious as to what can I do differently and what else can I research to see what can be incorporated.
And I want to jump on that too. So just because an activity doesn't work with one audience doesn't mean to throw it out. Same thing with the publication, right? Like, okay, maybe that doesn't resonate or play with this audience. Really invest some time in reflecting of what was it? Was it because it was too slow? It was too fast? Did it not fit the demographics, or what was it that made it? So it's not always about just throwing it out, but sometimes it is just about adapting it or thinking about, okay, with this type of an audience, that's not going to play. Let's move on to a different type of audience and see if that works.
Absolutely. And can I add one thing to
Yeah.
that, Jay? Something else to consider is asking the necessary preliminary questions if you're not familiar with the group. So you get an idea of what that culture is like. And so that's something that I've done over a number of years. It's not just a culture that's applicable to an individual, but organizations and teams have a culture too. What
Mhm.
are the norms? What are the acceptable behaviors? What are the things that are going to resonate with them? Even with the attire, I ask questions about that with my clients. So I'm not too underdressed or too overdressed. And overdressing would be more likely the issue. And so I want to make sure that there won't be anything that I can account for that I can do in a proactive way that's going to detract, that's going to hinder or impede that impact that I want to make in a learning event.
So, 100%. And it's so interesting to me, like, and I know he's a controversial figure, but, kind of going back to one of the things that you said was being able to walk away from a plan, because everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, as according to Tyson, right? And I will tell you, like, even goes not just above the design or the delivery of a facilitation, right? Like, from a business owner perspective, when COVID hit, we lost $200,000 the first week of quarantine. It was gone. And it was just like, I remember feeling that, like, oh, woe is me. And I'm like, and I am I'm usually pretty agile, pretty adaptive, but I had my little pity party, and it was a party of one, till one of my staff snapped me out of it. And they were like, you always talk about, like, agility and adaptability. I know we lost some resources, but what did we gain?
Mm,
That hit me so hard, Dr. Esther, because it was just like, we gained time. We gained
wow.
time for strategy. We gained time for development. We gained time for research. We gained a shared experience with literally every single one of our clients who are going through the exact same thing. And it was that pivot, but it was a mindset pivot before any of the behaviors could have pivoted. How have you experienced, when you see something like that, if you're talking to a young trainer, what advice would you give that trainer or that coach in being able to say, hey, you know what? sometimes you're going to lose something, but you're going to gain something else. How would you help coach them into getting some of that adaptability outside of, I'm going to say, read your book? I said that. You didn't have to say that, but what is your piece of advice for them?
So that really prompts a thought connected to, I don't know if you're familiar or if your audience is familiar, please look into it. Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence model. And something that not a lot of people know is that there are 4 quadrants to this model. You have the self-awareness quadrant, you have the social awareness quadrant, you have the relational awareness quadrant, as well as the self-control quadrant. That self-control quadrant is where you find adaptability.
Mm.
And when we think about self-awareness, essentially it's, I know what's going to stress me out. I know my pressure points. I can recognize when my mood changes, when I'm stressed. I know what drink I need. I don't drink though, Jay. When I need
Coffee,
to
right?
go into my seriously, I don't drink. So everything has to be a virgin. And so when I need to go to my happy place, I know what dessert is going to take me there. Okay. Things like that. Well, that's self-awareness. Do you recognize what your level of self-esteem is? How confident are you in your instructional design ability and your ability to manage and work with people or manage relationships and all? And then with that self-control quadrant, that's, well, the self-awareness, we said we know when our button has been pressed and when it hasn't, what's going to take us to that point, what's going to set us off, what's going to be the just the most pleasant thing for us. Whereas self-control is, are you able to maintain your composure once you've been triggered? You know, are you a little too excited because you're so happy? Can you pull it back? You
Dial it
know,
back.
your starter, back off, back off, back off. Can you control it? And so with the adaptability falling in there, something that I encourage people to think about is identifying what your triggers are. I had to think about what triggers me. Disrespect triggers me. A person who is not willing to admit a failure and has to, dance around it and can admit fault, not willing to work things out and talk out a situation, a person who just wants to delegate, doesn't want to do any work to assist and support the process, or people who are not respectful and conscious of differences when it comes to maybe neurodiverse or ensuring that there's equity when it comes to opportunities, benefits, and things. So just a few things like that, not speaking over someone who is not one that's quick to speak up and ensuring that everyone is included. Just a few things that stand out for me. So this is Esther. And so something I ask people to consider is, how well do you know yourself? Do you recognize things like that about yourself? Do you recognize your biases? And sometimes it helps Jay to see where they're rooted. Are they rooted to certain experiences
Yep.
that hurt us or that were just a joy to us, and understanding the why behind it, which is partially why when, we may go to a therapist or someone to talk about our problem, one of the things they want to ask you, tell me about your childhood, because
Right.
so much of who we are now is based on what we experienced, what we learned so early on in our lives. So being able to recognize you're one who, you have an issue when it comes to failure, all you can do is win. You're that high dominant person in this.
Mhm.
Are there some ways you can look to get a balance when it comes to that and recognize, yes, a lot of strengths with that D. What are some opportunity areas where that dominance may be an issue and you can work to address those particular areas? So that's something that I really put forth and encourage those that I mentor to do.
I love that. You said one of my absolute favorite words is balance. Too much of anything is going to probably cause you a little problem, and too little of something is probably going to do the same. So finding that balance, always a good thing. Dr. Esther, we are nearing the end of our time here. I could sit here and talk to you for hours. You mentioned the ATD 24 conference coming up. You're doing a program in advance of that. Can you share just a little bit more about that? If our audience wanted to take advantage of that, what an incredible opportunity. I know the ATD conferences are just incredible, and 3 days working with you, that would be an absolute treat. So share a little bit about what's going on there? And
For sure. So with this conference, ATD, if you're not aware, the Association for Talent Development is the largest professional association, nonprofit, largest professional association of talent development professionals in the world. They have an annual conference. ATD has been around for more than 80 years now. And so with this particular conference, we're going to be in New Orleans. It is taking place, I want to say the 19th through the 22nd of May. And prior to that, I will be facilitating a managing learning certificate program, which is geared to those who are responsible for the whole L&D, the whole learning and development area of their particular organization, or the whole learning and development team, or maybe they are a one-person band and responsible for everything learning wise. So we cover quite a bit in 3 days, and it's a lot to be covered, Jay, because we walk them through what needs to be built and incorporated in your learning and development strategy. We talk about the business plan. We talk about the importance of finding out what are the needs for those individuals who are in your various business areas. You can't work in isolation. You're not a solo act. One quote I came up with when I had my last group, when we were in San Diego, and I did the same program before the conference, was, when I learned the business, I learned the need. When I learned the need, I've learned my business.
that's
If my
amazing.
business is learning and development, I need to learn the essence, the core of what's going on in my organization. I need
Love
to get
that.
around to those different business area leaders, find out what keeps them up at night. What are their pain points? And learn how I can create and develop that learning portfolio for the organization that connects to the bottom line, because it's targeting not only what's important overall to the organization, why we do business, our vision, our mission, but also addressing the needs of those respective business areas. So we talk about that. We talk about how to partner with your business areas and your organization, as well as those relationships, how to maintain them, how to do the influence, what are those sections in the learning and development strategy, when you want to outsource, what are the steps involved with managing those contracts, the negotiation piece. And those are just a handful of the topics that we cover, Jay. So much goes
Incredible.
into that, as well as ADDIE. We spend a chunk of time with ADDIE. And so that's something I love. And then all of this is in the 3 days prior to the conference. And in addition to that certificate for those 3 days, I am also doing one of the conference sessions, Jay, at the
Nice.
conference. And it is C-suite talk and 3D. And
Wow.
the 3D is when you go to C-suite, when you are looking for a decision, approval, or sign off on something for your learning and development project, initiative, or whatever, you need to go to the senior level management team with data, dollars, and decisions.
Ooh,
So
I
your
like
talk
that.
needs to incorporate data, dollars, and decisions. And I will be breaking that down as to what goes into that. And so that's something I was able to do for ATD Detroit, give them a sneak peek into it. And I leveraged a Shark Tank type of a theme, because I mean, they're a panel of judges,
That's right.
investor
Brilliant.
capitalists, and we can learn a whole lot about C-suite talk looking at Shark Tank.
I love that. I love that. Well, Dr. Esther, I can't tell you how appreciative I am for you joining us here on the Talent Forward, sharing your knowledge and helping shape the future of talent development. We will be putting the Amazon link to Dr. Esther's book in the show notes, as well as we'll get a link from you and how people can sign up. As somebody who's done a couple of the ATD certificates, as well as the master trainer designation, I can tell you they are well thought out, they are brilliantly executed, and I have absolutely no doubt that you will be making that impact that we talked about earlier on everybody that comes to your session. So thank you again so much for being with us today. It's been my pleasure. And don't be surprised if you get asked to come and talk to us again, because I know that we've scratched the surface of your knowledge and experience. So thank you again, Dr. Esther.
Thank you so much, Jay. And anyone's free to reach out to me at www.lynnjack.com. And then concerning ATD, I encourage you to visit ATD.org to learn more about what ATD has available in terms of L&D materials and opportunities.
Amazing. Do yourself a favor, connect with Dr. Esther Jackson, and thank you again so much for everything that you do for talent development.
My pleasure. Have a great one, Jay. Take care, everyone.